Hello and welcome back to this channel. My name is Muhammad, and uh, today's topic is concerning a sword called the well called the broadsword, or the basket hilted sword, or some would call it a broadsword. Now, the basket hilted sword is a type of sword of the early modern era, characterized by its basket shaped handguard, as you saw. In modern times, these swords are often referred to as broadswords, apparently. The basket hilt swords were generally used as military swords. True broadswords are double edged, while a sword that has one sharp end and a thickened back are called backswords. Various different basket hilts were mounted on broadswords and backswords. One of the weapons used in modern German dueling sport of the weapon types in modern German dueling sport, Mensur, I don't know, or academic fencing, is the basket hilted Korbschläger. The basket hilted sword was developed during the 16th century and eventually rose to widespread use through the 17th and then 18th century, especially by heavy cavalry up to the Napoleonic era. At first, the sword's wire guard was a simple design, but as time passed on, it became more sculpted and ornate. At first, the earliest positive dating of these swords were two of these broadswords from around the time of the English Civil War. But eventually there would be a finding of a more earlier broadsword, the basket hilt sword. Eventually, there would be an earlier finding when one of the basket hilted swords was recovered from the wreck of an English warship called the Mary Rose that was lost in 1545. The basket hilted sword was a cut and thrust sword which was used more militarily in context, contrasting the rapier, the similarly thrust heavily oriented sword often worn with civilian dress. The term broadsword was used in the 17th and 18th centuries, referring to double-edged basket-hilted swords. The term was introduced to distinguish these cut and thrust swords from the narrower small swords. During the 18th century, the fashion of dueling in Europe was focused on lighter small swords. So fencing with broadswords was seen more as a Scottish specialty. Descendants of the basket hilt sword, albeit in the form of backswords with reduced half or three-quarter baskets, remained in use among cavalry during the Napoleonic era and throughout the 19th century, all the way down to the eve of World War One. And surprisingly, one of the last active use of the Scottish broadsword during war in the hand was in World War II by Major Jack Churchill. Now, as I've said before, by the 17th century, there were regional variants of the basket hilt: the Wallen hilt, the Sinclair hilt, Schiavona, mortuary sword, Scottish broadsword, and sometimes of Eastern European palashes. I don't know. The mortuary and claybank variants were commonly used in the British Isles, though commonly used in the British Isles, either domestically produced or acquired through trade with Italy and Germany. And the sword also influenced the 18th century cavalry saber. Since there's time left, we can get into like the subtypes. So the Schiavona was a Renaissance sword that became popular in Italy during the 16th and 17th centuries, stemming from the 16th century sword of the Balkan mercenaries that formed the bodyguards of the Doge of Venice. The name came from the fact that the guard consisted largely of the Schiavoni. A similar weapon was the cut and thrust mortuary sword, which was used after 1612 25 by cavalry during the English Civil War. This usually two-edged sword sported half basket hilt with a straight blade, some 90 to 105 centimeters long, and Scottish broadsword. A common weapon among clansmen during the Jacobite rebellion of the late 17th and early 18th century was the Scottish basket-hilted broadsword, commonly known as Clydheim or Claymore, meaning great sword in Gaelic. Some authors suggest that Claybeag should be used instead from a purported Gaelic small sword. This does not parallel Scottish Gaelic usage. Sinclair hilt is the name given by Victorian antiquarians in the late 19th century Scandinavian swords. Now, I looked up broadsword, and Wikipedia gave me the basket hilted sword, and then this is what I get for broadsword by Google Images. I I don't know, but yeah, I think that's all I could really talk about for today. So, uh, yeah, thanks for watching, and goodbye.